Today on The Quad, a special guest to tell us all about behind the scenes in that infamous Oxford debate.
That is a daily average of 3,200 calories per person. The NHS in this country...
Order!
And talking about what's going on in Syria, how is that going to change the communications war? And as usual, lots of scumbags, lots of heroes. Only on JNS, only on The Quad. Welcome back, everybody, to The Quad. And here in the Jerusalem studio with me, my co-host, Shoshanna Keats Jaskoll, the founder of Chochmat Nashim, fighting to elevate Orthodox women's voices and fighting discrimination. Unfortunately, there is a lot of it. And very special guest from London, Jonathan Sacerdoti, returning to our show as a co-host this time, with lots of juicy gossip about what happened at the Oxford Union. Jonathan is a journalist, a broadcaster, a commentator. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you here. I know you've had a very busy week because you had a very busy month. I saw you literally 2 days before that Oxford Union debate where there had been just so much polemic and so much, it's such a road to get there. So share with us, because you really were the Nachshon. You were the first person who spoke in the most hostile environment. And I know hostile environments, but I think, honestly, that was incredible. So we've all seen the debate. Just tell me from a personal perspective what it was like to stand there, returning, because you are a graduate of Oxford University, returning to that place and facing a crowd that would have lynched you had it not been because of the security you had with you, and what ensued that night.
It was definitely an experience, and I will say that I went there expecting a hostile audience, and the organization of it, from the president, who himself is an Egyptian Muslim, and the committee and all of the preparatory stuff was very negative. They made it very clear all the way along that we were not going to be particularly warmly welcomed. But I was surprised by the level of vitriol and aggression in that room. We walked in last, so the other team had already been seated. The whole audience had been seated. We walked in to tuts and coughs and even jeers and boos from some people. So it was made clear from the beginning what sort of reception we would have. And I will say this, I didn't go there expecting to be popular.
Yeah.
I did go there hoping to have a fair and reasoned debate. And I think the whole point of places like the Oxford Union and student debating societies is that they're meant to have high profile events. It's meant to be a bit entertaining. And it's also meant to make you think, make you listen to arguments you haven't heard. It's a very British idea, this kind of formal debate. But the concept is a very strong one. It's that you can politely, with rules and manners, have a structured discussion about a topic where two sides are represented and get to interact through speeches, through interruptions, and you can learn a lot. But there was absolutely no desire among that crowd or among the organisers for that to be what happened that evening. Instead, it was really a sort of sham trial of Israel and throwing a bunch of us to the lions and expecting us to crumble. And what I will say is I was part of a wonderful team of good friends and colleagues. I think I can now call them that, having gone through it with them. And it was really a surprise, I believe, to the Oxford Union that we didn't crumble under this pressure. We represented our opinions and our views in a strong and mostly calm and civilized way.
Dignified way. You guys really kept your dignity, and it just, they looked so bad. And then after this, the actual broadcast of the debates, they tried to edit out all the insults and the jeers.
Yeah, they usually publish on their YouTube videos of each speech separately. For my one, which, as you say, opened the pro-Israel side against this ludicrous motion. So they have a motion. They said Israel is an apartheid state guilty of genocide. So double whammy. They could have had prospects of a two-state solution, or peace is further away than ever, something that would have been...
the war has killed peace and Israel's to blame, whatever.
Something, but, genocide and apartheid in one phrase. It was very clear what they wanted. And yes, they published my speech. Shamefully, there was a an episode, let's say, of this sort of banshee screaming at me to my face. She was screaming, liar, liar, you effing liar, genocidal mother effer, if you'll excuse the non-language. And she just wouldn't stop. But I must say, I've never experienced something as vicious and unhinged
hysterical
in an event. And I've been to quite a few with hostile audiences.
And they didn't kick her out for that.
So initially they didn't. And that was what happened, was the whole proceedings broke down because all of our team said, you must remove this woman. You know, she's literally stopping the speeches. And the interesting thing about it was that actually what she reacted to specifically wasn't an argument of mine. It wasn't an opinion of mine. It was actually a fact. So the very thing that triggered her was when I read out the summary of the number of calories of aid that has gone into Gaza, that I said that it was an average of so much, and that average was above the daily recommended average for British men by the National Health Service in Britain. Now, these facts to that audience were obviously unknown because they hadn't looked into these issues. But so it was just unthinkable that she could allow me to express those facts. And so I think that said it all. And I think the reason that a lot of this has resonated is that so widely around the world is that it wasn't just about Israel. I think it was about civilized debate and the ability to disagree with one another and learn from one another.
In a safe place, I have to say, that obviously doesn't exist anymore.
You know, they uploaded that video. They muted the 2 minutes of this abuse and what went on. They stuck to a wide shot, so you couldn't really tell what was going on. Now, luckily, I'd brought my phone and I had recorded an audio note of it. Actually, because I wanted to send it to my mum on WhatsApp. So she Jewish, exactly. So, so when they published the video without the sound of all that, I just, I put the two together in Premiere and I popped it on my YouTube and on my X. And within 1 week, that video's had 1 million views.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, 1 million views for a 20-something minute speech about Israel. So I'm very proud that I got that defense of Israel based on facts and logic and reasoned argument out to a very wide audience. But the reason I think that many people watched it, and I can tell you this because of the large amount of emails and tweets and what have you that people have been sending me, the contact form on my website has never been so busy. People are absolutely flabbergasted at how we were treated and how this place that's meant to represent in British society, free speech, intelligent debate, the creme de la creme of British university students, supposedly, and this was how they behaved. So I think that that's what resonated. And people then saw that corresponded with the side that was against Israel. And I would say that they really acted like free speech terrorists. It was the terrorism equivalent of debate. They didn't come there to debate. They didn't come there to talk with us, to counter us with facts and arguments and civility. They just came there to disrupt us.
Yeah.
Because they don't have anything. That's all they have.
To intimidate us. And then to cancel us when they put it online, to censor the speeches. So I would say that all of that was an education for the world, not just in Israel issues, but in how you get treated when you go and make a calm and reasoned speech. As I said at the end of the speech, only people of goodwill willing to have a calm discussion on these complicated issues can ever hope to pursue peace. And those people were not interested in pursuing peace.
Unbelievable. Shoshanna, when we look at what's going on in the United States, because this is Oxford, which is the bastion of academia in the UK, but also in the world. Sure. So what's the equivalent in America, where you come from? Harvard, right? Yale. Harvard, you have vandalization of the Hillels. You have swastikas been put on students' doors.
Yes.
It's no better, I'm assuming?
Absolutely not better. And I would say it's the same kind of thing, but it's even worse because, well, I don't want to say it's worse because I don't know if Oxford is doing this as well, but the curriculum itself.
Oh, right.
The curriculum itself has been bastardized. The learning is no longer objective. The learning is like you said, the topic was leading the witness. Like, is Israel apartheid genocide state? So the courses in Harvard and the professors in Harvard don't even pretend to be giving you objective truth anymore. They are leading you, they are telling you, and they are bastardizing what is supposed to be education and intellectual thought. Rather, they're telling you what to think, and they are leading you down a very specific path. And yes, I think it is tragic. And if people, what do I know about England? Everyone lines up. Okay, nobody moves from the queue, right? Like that is, you stay in line because that is what you do and that is proper behavior. So for me, it's like, okay, Americans are Americans, but for the British to really step out of line literally and figuratively to say, we don't even care about debate anymore. We don't even care about the rules anymore. That to me is a real breakdown of British best society. And I think that is what people are seeing in this Oxford debate. Like, you're not just seeing one debate, you're seeing the degradation of
breakdown,
beautiful, the desire to have a debate and to be intellectual and to learn and to listen doesn't exist anymore.
And I think there's another element to that, because that's absolutely the case. And I think that people then look at who has done that to these bastions of British civilization or academia or free speech. And, there's no getting away from who the people in that room were. Many of the insults in that room were in Arabic, which shocked our 2 Arab team members on the pro-Israel side.
They were calling them prostitutes and whores in Arabic.
Yeah. And traitors. And the point was that, so some people watching it said, oh, well, Mossab and Youssef Haddad didn't necessarily keep as calm as you did. And I've said to them, well, firstly, they kept pretty calm, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree.
But secondly, that's because they understood every single insult that was being thrown at them.
Yes.
And I didn't.
You didn't.
And on top of that, I think you can't have a debate about the Middle East and complain when 2 Middle Easterners come and bring a bit of kharif. So
Yeah.
I think effectively the issue was not them. It was the who had infiltrated the Oxford Union, who had twisted it in this way, and who had made it all about attacking Israel and Jews, the Jewish state, attacking the Jewish speakers. The Jews were afraid. I got people writing to me telling me they were afraid to come to the event,
yes.
Jewish students.
I wrote that on Twitter, actually, because somebody wrote something and I said, well, there's no discrimination. I'm like, well, when Jewish students are scared to actually go to the debate, that tells you everything.
They made the Oxford Union a hostile environment for Jewish students.
That's incredible.
And they may claim they didn't intend to, but it was blindingly obvious.
And wasn't the head of the Oxford Union also debating on the side of the motion?
Yes,
What's that about?
So after we recruited Mossab to our team because somebody pulled out quite short notice and he heroically flew in specially, that put the fear of God, I think, into Norman Finkelstein, who was on the other side. He pulled
Who I ended up
You were debating him with Piers Morgan. So
I got the dropouts of the Oxford debate.
So you took that for us as a tag team.
I took that for the team.
I can understand why he was scared, because he's this sort of pompous,
mediocre.
Yes, and I mean this is sort of slow, ponderous method of speaking, trying to dominate the conversation with slurs and what have you. I don't think he wanted to be in the room with people with direct, actual, real experience of what he was talking about. And the truth is that I think he told you that he wouldn't debate psychopaths.
Yes, right? he said because Jonathan and I had met, and he said ask him why he doesn't want to debate Mossab, because he pulled out of the debate because of Mossab. So I asked him, and he says, I don't debate psychopaths. I made an exception for you.
Oh my God.
Okay, if a psychopath is calling me a psychopath, I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just zoom out a little bit. Now we have, since then, the Syria breakdown. And I don't know whether it's just me and wishful thinking, but I'm beginning to feel in the music, as we say, a change of debate or a change of conversation. People are beginning to perhaps realize that there's a big regional theater going on and that this was only part of it. And I think that from a year ago, we saw that people see this very localized, Israelis against Palestinians and the poor Palestinians. But I think...
Yeah, like we're the problem in the Middle East.
Exactly. But I think as the war has progressed, Lebanon, the Islamic Republic, and now Syria, everything that's going on around it, not that I take this man as an example, but when you have George Galloway, who is a well-known anti-Semite, he has made his career out of being an anti-Semite. He got elected for 5 minutes to Parliament recently as the kind of anti-Semite in the room voted by Islamists. When he's saying, I'm done with the Arabs, look what's happening in Syria, either Qatar's cut off his payroll, or maybe people are actually waking up that the Islamic problem is a much bigger problem than just the local conflict, Palestinians, Israel. You're out there, Jonathan. What do you think about that?
So the morning and daytime before the strikes in Syria, I was actually on the northern border. And so I really felt as we came down, the news literally started trickling through. And then by the morning, it became clear what a spectacular military undertaking Israel had engaged in. One of the biggest of its history, to take out effectively the whole Syrian army, more or less, and that threat. And I think that I wrote in a piece that day for The Express that I do believe that the world is looking at that. And while there are still the Free Palestine Brigade on the streets, condemning that and saying, oh, Israel's occupying a bit of Syria now and it's attacking Syria after Assad fell, I think, anyone with any even minimal knowledge understands that Israel did the world a massive favor there.
Did the Syrians a massive favor as well.
Exactly. And it did itself a massive favor, because I think that what Israel's done is to restore the image of deterrence throughout the last 14 months. And by doing that in Syria, it showed exactly what it showed when it took out the main leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon and then continued methodically dealing with the threat from Hezbollah in Lebanon. It did the same in Gaza over the last 14 months, acting as carefully as it could to minimize the Hamas threat whilst trying to maintain the well-being and welfare of as many civilians as possible, and of course the hostages. I think it did the same when it attacked Iran after the barrage of missiles. It's just said to the world, you did catch us asleep on October the 7th, 2023, but no more, and we're not a paper tiger. And if you thought that showed we weren't as strong as we always portrayed, you're wrong. We're stronger. We can reach depth into Yemen and take out key strategic facilities in Yemen. We can reach right into Iran. We can take out all of the air defenses in Iran. Now Syria probably has helped with that as well. Future Iranian strike is going to be that much easier. And the whole world knows it. I believe if it hasn't realized it now, when history is written in the not too distant future, people will look back and all the noise of hundreds of thousands of people on the streets screaming genocide, blue murder, and free Palestine will all pale into insignificance if Israel continues to act in a way that is responsibly and righteously protecting the Western world and civilization. And I believe that people are starting to realize that. And January is going to be when that becomes a more popular opinion in America.
Absolutely. What does the Twitterati think, Shoshanna? What are you noticing?
I'm noticing that people are listening to the stories that are coming out of Syria. I think you can't hear or see or read anything that's coming out of Syria now and not sit in your chair and feel extreme sadness and pain. I mean, torture chambers, incinerators. You're talking about people who were literally crushed to death. Inventions of torture. There were woodworking tools that were used on human beings. And I feel like anyone who's actually listening to that has to have in their mind somewhere, number one, I had no idea this was going on. And that is the first step to realizing that I don't know what's going on other places, right? Like if you realize that you're missing a lot of information or critical information, at a certain point you have to say, maybe what I thought I knew isn't actually the full picture. And once people start to open that door, then Israel is able to be seen as different, okay? And that's really, really important because people don't know. They're speaking out of ignorance. When you're screaming genocide at Israel, but then you hear what's happening out of the 1.3 million,
actually a genocide,
1.3 million prisoners, at least 10% were murdered in the prisons, and probably many more. And you have 50,000, is what I heard, family members rushing the prison to try and find their loved ones, having not seen them in over a decade. How you can not stop and say, maybe I don't really understand what's going on in the Middle East. Maybe Bashar al-Assad is a criminal and Israel taking out that military, taking out the missiles and the planes and this and that is actually a good thing. And I think that is what I'm seeing slowly but surely, people maybe not saying it out loud, but kind of like coming to that realization. And that I think is the first step to really understanding that what's happening here, there is evil in the world. It's not Israel.
Well, I hope you're right. There's many Syrians in London, and they are celebrating at the moment the downfall of Assad, who caused the refugee problem in Europe, essentially. What are they going to do? Are they going back? What do you hear?
A lot of refugees, I don't know if from the UK specifically, have headed back, because I think generally speaking, people who are genuine refugees from their homeland do want to go back when there's a safety and possibility to, which is an interesting distinction if one looks at what is defined as a Palestinian refugee.
Of course.
But that's for another time. I think that interesting thing for those who maybe aren't aware is when you look at how Syrians and Iranians and people like that in the diaspora actually are the biggest supporters of Israel's actions. I mean, some of the people I've met over the last 14 months who have been most vocal, most outspoken, put themselves in most danger, most risk in supporting Israel against marauding mobs of pro-Hamas protesters have been people exactly like that. Iranians who know exactly. People who really know what this is about.
Yeah.
You know, I had a silly story, but I had a plumber the other day who came to mend my boiler. A broken boiler at this time of year in London is not fun. And he was Iranian, and we got chatting. And he said, I moved here 10 years ago after the Green Revolution. I was in the crowds. People around me were shot and killed by the regime.
Oh, God.
The Islamic revolutionary regime does not represent Iran. This is what you hear from, you know, virtually every Iranian in the diaspora who fled. He had to flee. He had to get fake passports. He had to then come to the UK, claim asylum with his wife and child. Now he's lived in the UK for 10 years. But people like that, and people like my friend Nihat Gorbani, who goes out all the time to protest against the pro-Hamas protests in London with his banner, Hamas is a terrorist organization.
And he gets arrested, by the way.
7, 8 times, I think.
He gets arrested, not the people shouting death to the Jews.
And this is my fear, because the more I look at those protests and they're arresting people like him and others like him, quiet people who are standing up against that mob, and you hear what that mob are shouting, and you know what it means, and you know who they're really protesting on behalf of, and you think to yourself, the police are on the edges protecting the mob from being upset by people who are standing up bravely against what is effectively the new Nazism of our era. And, you know, I spoke the other day with Einat Wilf, and she calls it Palestinianism. She says that it is a political ideology that is spreading into those crowds, and it does represent something dark. If it were about the Palestinian people and protecting them and coexistence and a peaceful Palestinian state, they wouldn't behave the way they do. They are protesting against people dealing with Hamas. Hamas is persecuting, killing, beating, torturing Palestinians. There are videos that the IDF has released that they've captured from CCTV in Gaza. We know how Hamas treats Palestinians. So people that go out and protest viciously against Israel dealing with Hamas are clearly not concerned about the well-being of Palestinian people. And I think that people like the Iranians and Syrians in the diaspora know exactly what Israel is doing, and they know that this is a worthy war, and that Israel does, generally speaking, war is horrible, but Israel behaves within the bounds of war as best it can to spare
than anyone.
Civilians. And I think that being here, I must say, you know, even I, who know this subject well, being here regularly, especially during the war, it's a boost, because you get to talk to experts and strategists and analysts, and they remind you what you know. But being in the UK all the rest of the time, it wears you down. You know,
of course,
absolutely.
And you wouldn't be human if you watched the BBC and all these channels.
And didn't start feeling sorry for the other side.
And I do feel sorry.
Me too.
Very sorry. And I think it's tragic that people are suffering. But the misrepresentation of why they're suffering.
And who's to blame.
And at whose hands they're suffering.
Exactly.
It's enough to make people doubt the strategy of Israel. So I recommend anyone that can, especially journalists, come here and see it for themselves. Because when you do inquire, ask difficult questions, go to the difficult places. I've been doing that all of this week, as I do every time I'm here. And you go and examine it. And not everything's perfect, but on the whole, this is a military which, when you speak to anyone, top to bottom, they are concerned massively with the well-being of the enemy's civilian population. And I think that I've never heard in people I speak to anything other than that doctrine, that Israel is trying to do what it needs to do whilst defending the people it's not against.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And you represented that beautifully at that Oxford debate. So God bless you for your bravery. For our very special segment, which is getting a lot of attention, Shoshanna, tell us what's happening with our end of year initiative.
I love reading these emails. You guys are sending in your emails to quadscumbags@gmail.com with your nominations for Scumbag of the Year. And I love getting the emails. Like, it just pops up on my phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's a great one. Good one. And by the way, there are some that are really leading. I won't tell you who it is, but there are leaders in the pack. So it's a lot of fun. So send in your nominations for your Scumbag of the Year, and maybe you'll be on air.
And what is the email address again, Shoshanna?
Quadscumbags with an S @gmail.com. You're going to make me spell it?
No.
Okay.
I think everybody knows how to spell scumbag, Shoshanna.
Surprised that was available.
I am surprised it was available. You're right, Jonathan. Okay, so please lead us into the segment, Shoshanna.
Okay.
Who's your scumbag of the week?
You know, it's Christmas time. Okay, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yes, I love Christmas.
And even it only took me leaving the United States to actually be able to, enjoy Christmas, because as a Jew in America, we were not allowed to do that so
Right.
much, depending on your household. So I think Christmas is wonderful. But I saw this week baby Jesus in a keffiyeh. And I was like, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, this is a joke, right? Or like somebody did it on a campus. And then the Pope was there, and I thought they actually photoshopped the Pope in. I thought it was a joke. And then I opened it up, and I'm like, you have got to, because apicorsis, which is blasphemy on the highest level, to put baby Jesus, baby Jewish Jesus, in a keffiyeh in the nativity scene in Bethlehem, because that is anachronistic.
It's anachronistic.
And
it's
wrong.
historically inaccurate. It's wrong, and it's political.
And it's
something
political.
that the Pope
Which is not allowed.
should have stayed well
Way away from. You
You
can't politicize Christmas, guys. Come on. As a Jew, I can tell you that. So I'm not going to call the Pope my scumbag, because I don't think that's very nice, but I will say that the artist, Johnny Andonia Fatin Nastas Mitsawi, Palestinians from Dar al-Kilma University in Bethlehem, designed the display, and I don't even know if the Pope knew about it. So that was really not nice, guys, to take baby Jesus, put him in a keffiyeh, and surprise the Pope like that. You're my scumbags this
Well,
year.
were they surprising the Pope? Do you not know where he was
I'm giving
going
him
to?
the Danlikovskos. I'm giving him the
You're
benefit
giving
of the
him
doubt.
The benefit of the doubt. I don't know about that.
You think
I
he
don't
knew?
know. Well, if he didn't, his team did a terrible job.
Well, that's true. You're all the scumbags. All of you who knew about it.
I just find it ridiculous.
It's horrible.
Yes.
It's not only horrible, but it erases Christianity, right?
Yes.
It erases the Christian history and Jewish history. Also, it's ridiculous. The keffiyeh came from Iraq, guys. Get your story
I
straight.
think maybe even Egypt. But anyway,
Get your history straight. It ain't Palestinian.
And and it wasn't the rag that baby Jesus was born on, that's for sure.
Certainly was not.
Thank you very much, Shoshanna. Now, I'm going to break protocol because normally my scumbag comes last, but because Jonathan's scumbag is actually very unorthodox because it's leading into heroes, I'm going to do mine.
Okay.
And mine was also Christmas themed. And it is the mobs in Germany that are calling for the cancellation of Christmas.
الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله.
So, I mean, we've seen this before. We've seen it in different European capitals where little nativity scenes in malls are getting protested or they're getting vandalized.
Yeah.
But this
Intimidated.
is a full-on protest canceling a Christian holiday in a Christian country. So where are we, people?
Yeah.
That in Europe now, it is completely acceptable to protest against the main national holiday of the country. I grew up as a diaspora Jew.
Yeah.
We loved Christmas. We didn't have a Christmas tree. We're Jewish. We have lots of Christian friends that we went and we celebrated with. And that is part of pluralism.
Yes.
That is part of living in the society that you live in. When you are essentially coming into another country.
You're a guest.
As an extremist, even if you're not a guest, even if you've been there for 20 years, but you've become an extremist or you are an extremist or you came as an extremist and you're not saying I'm going to come in and blend in.
Right.
And everybody's going to live the way that they want to live, the way they're free to live, because that's why you showed up in that country. You're saying I want to cancel the other person's holiday. I mean, Jews are too small a minority for them to be protested against because really you're not going to get a lot of traction. Our holidays in the diaspora are not that huge. But in Germany, to go and to ask for the cancellation of Christmas.
Unacceptable.
Come on, guys.
Absolutely
You're all
unacceptable.
scumbags. What are you thinking? So those are my scumbags of the week. And now,
Well deserved.
Jonathan Sacerdoti is going to do something very unorthodox because it turns out that his scumbag and hero are the same person.
Intriguing.
I'm sorry to break your rules, but I'm going to go.
So not
for-
British to
I
break
know,
rules.
and I'm going to break them again. I'm going to say hero and villain. And
He doesn't want to say the word scumbag. We get it. We get it. It's
it's
very
not nice.
British.
It's not nice.
It's not nice. It's not nice.
So I'm going to give you a hero and a villain.
Okay.
The hero is Benjamin Netanyahu, and the villain is also Benjamin Netanyahu.
Pray tell.
I will say that this is because we've seen Bibi this week starting the trial, and this is, to me, quite extraordinary to see the Prime Minister defending himself at a time of war, at a high time of stress. To some of us around the world, it looks extraordinary. But of course, to Israelis, many have been waiting for this moment for a very long time and feel he shouldn't be let off the hook because of the war. We're now 14 months or so in, and so maybe it is time. I would say that the reason that Benjamin Netanyahu can be both hero and villain in this assessment is that he embodies a sort of duality, which I think also reflects very well the state of Israel. And he's been prime minister for so long, many can barely remember any other for more than a few months.
Yeah.
And in a sense, he has become Israel to many Israelis and to many outside Israel. He's a sort of quintessential, indispensable man of the state of Israel. He's mastered the art of survival, like Israel. He has found ways that are ever ingenious to keep himself surviving as the prime minister, like Israel has found ingenious and creative ways to keep itself there. And he operates with this near obsession on not just what he does, but on the perception of what he does and the narrative of what he does. And though he's been repeatedly shot down, like the state of Israel, he has repeatedly got up and recovered himself. So all of that sounds very good. But on the other hand, I recognize, especially when I'm here, the amount of vitriol and loathing that there is of Bibi Netanyahu among many in Israel. Yeah. And he is somebody that is very polarizing because there are some people who lionize him and other people who absolutely despise him. And again, I think that's rather reflective of this state. This is a country that around the world people tend to love or hate. We call it in England a Marmite thing.
Yes.
It's this horrible spread that actually I love, other people think is disgusting. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And I think that, again, he uses chaos very effectively for his own purpose of survival. And some would say that Israel has also experienced this chaos since October the 7th and used it for a reunification, for a unity, for re-strengthening, repurposing, focusing itself. So I think in many ways, Benjamin Netanyahu can be both painted as a hero and a villain. And I think that that is reflective of the way that the state of Israel is often treated.
Well, that's a very thoughtful analysis. And it's interesting because on this show already, we've had him as a hero and we've had him as a villain, to use your
Never
word.
as both, though.
Never as both.
Never as both.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
you've really broken protocol. and that's great. That's a very, very thoughtful analysis. And I think he would be thrilled.
I was just going to say, you're just going to make his ego bigger.
To be compared
The embodiment of the country.
The embodiment of the country.
I'm available for a UK exclusive interview if he's interested. So him and Sarah, both of them.
We'll try and make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and that segues us onto heroes. Shoshanna, who's your hero?
My heroes are actually some of whom we know and some of whom we don't know personally, or I don't know personally. But they are Okay. It's a report compiled by a team. Andrew Fox, Mark Zlokin, Elliot Mellon, Tanya Glazer, and I'm missing someone, Eisenberg, who put an incredible report together for the Henry Jackson Society of how Hamas itself has changed its numbers so often in order to inflate the numbers and to make men be women or men be children, so that it seems like there are so many more civilians, so many more men and women and children being killed in Gaza. And they used their own numbers and showed the inconsistencies of those numbers to show that they are so inflated and so out of proportion that
It can't be true.
That it literally can't be true, even when you use Hamas's own numbers. Meaning, it's not like you're going to the IDF. You're not going to Bibi Netanyahu. You're not using someone else's. You're using Hamas's own numbers.
Verifying it, even though the UN claims that they have, but I don't think they have at all.
And then they blame Israel and they say, well, we can't get in there, so we can't verify it. So, okay, so use Hamas's numbers themselves, right? Even if you use those numbers, they have shown consistently in their report that you cannot trust their numbers, that they create numbers out of nowhere, and that they make, women and children out of adult men, and then they count even deaths that are regular deaths, like cancer deaths, as IDF.
They don't list any combatants.
And no combatants, exactly.
I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. Even if you take their number, 42,000, whatever it's at, let's say we take their number at face value. We know we've killed 20,000 combatants.
Right.
They won't talk about that.
Right.
We know that of a population of 2.2 million, how many people should be dying a year? A good few tens of thousands. They stick them all in there. And like you said, this report has proven that they inflate the numbers of women and children. And I'm sure, Jonathan, when you were in that debate and people are like, 25,000 children dead, they just invent these numbers.
And also, it's worth saying that there are some of those child casualties are children that have been forced to be child soldiers by Hamas.
Yes,
there are records
exactly.
of not just 18, 17, 16-year-olds, even 13-year-olds
13-year-olds
carrying weapons. So obviously it complicates matters. And Andrew Fox has been quite clear as well that other than Mark Zlotchin actually did loads of work on this about adding up women and children, and it would amount to more than the totals and things like that. So it's internally inconsistent.
It's internally inconsistent.
Purely objectively, it's statistically impossible for the figures
so
to be valid.
If the only thing you talk is numbers, it's wrong. It's not correct. It's misleading and it's deceitful. But I want to say, just on a last note, what's fascinating about this is that in the report itself, they talk about where's the media getting the information from. 98% of the media stories get their information on casualties from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas, and 5%, I know 98 and 5 do not make 100, I understand that, but I'm sure that there's a reason in there.
I think it's 98% mention one and 5% mention the other.
There you go.
They can do both.
Thank you for the mathematics. I don't do math. Get it from the IDF. So you're talking about people who use consistently.
Use terrorists as a source.
Use terrorists as a source, and these terrorists are liars. And they proved it, and they are my heroes for actually doing that work crunching those numbers and showing that. So
and can I jump in with another thought there, if there's time, which is just to say that's one of the reasons I've just written a piece about journalists being allowed into Gaza, because I was with a group of journalists this week, and many of them are frustrated by that, understandably. And I think that actually what's important to register is that journalists are used by Hamas. Yeah. Often they're so credulous, they don't know they're being used by Hamas. Yeah. The same way as doctors are used by Hamas and humanitarian aid workers are used by Hamas. Sometimes it's blackmail. You can't do your work looking after the civilians unless X, Y, Z. And sometimes they just fool them. So even without being in Gaza, they are 98% mentioning Hamas figures. Imagine if they were going into Gaza and were subjected to the full ruthlessness and calculation, Machiavellianism of the terrorists.
Exactly.
Journalists wouldn't stand a chance at not being hijacked as a tool of war. And I think they're already, in some cases,
they are being used without question.
Used that way.
Yeah.
The best thing is that they don't even realize or don't want to realize or willfully go along with it. And the worst thing is that the State Department in America was also using these numbers. The president was using these numbers. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. And I kept saying to people, listen, these are terrorists in a tunnel giving you these numbers that make no sense and go up
they're not
every
up there
day
counting.
By the same numbers. They go up every day mathematically. Anyway, well, very worthy heroes. We know Andrew Fox. He's actually an incredible asset and does wonderful work.
Great guy.
So he's a great hero this week and the team. Thank you, Shoshanna. So my hero this week is Erin Molan. Erin Molan is a journalist in Sky News Australia.
Yes.
Who has been morally clear from day one about the dangers of the jihadis, about the narrative that is twisted, about anti-Semitism in Australia that nobody wants to call out, even though we just had a firebomb attack on a synagogue that by miracle didn't kill hundreds of people. It happened to be when they just left, there were 2 people in there. And this woman has put her career on the line week in, week out, calling out the hypocrisy of the West, calling out the evil that exists. And she got fired.
She was fired.
She was fired this week. And she went on a podcast and she said, if this is the price I have to pay for truth, I will pay that price.
You see, the problem is, and it's always been this way with me, I just care too much about fighting for every single hostage still captive in Gaza, hundreds of days in, whilst a fair chunk of the world seemingly not only allows their captors completely off the hook, but praises them, worships them, idolizes them, rewards them. Pressure Hamas. Oh, God, no, don't be silly. They're just terrorists. Let them be. Pressure Israel. That's it. The only democracy in the Middle East fighting bloodthirsty killers on multiple fronts on behalf of the entire world, desperately trying to get their people back, including babies, while simultaneously trying to protect the rest of their citizens from the same fate. Yes, demonize them. They are the problem. What a plan, huh? brilliant. And how many people fell for it and continue to, hook, line, and sinker.
She thanked everybody who supported her because everybody's up in arms. But this is exactly what you're talking about, Jonathan, that dissenting opinions are silenced instead of saying, okay, now we have a diverse opinion. What did she do that was so wrong? She was too pro-a-democracy or too anti-Semitism?
I will say I'm not sure if it's totally as black and white as it seems, because I've seen a few tweets back and forth from her and Sky News. She's left.
Right.
It does seem mysterious, but that Sky News Australia is extremely pro-Israel and pro-Jewish.
I know.
So I'm sure there might be a bit more to the story than meets the eye at first. So I'm hesitant to condemn them, but I certainly agree that she's a massive hero because of her dedication to truth and justice. When other people see that as being biased and pro-Jews in Israel and that is some sort of crime, she is a journalist who says, no, it's just representing
truth,
the side of truth, morality and righteousness in this ongoing world battle against the opposites.
She obviously just sees it very clearly.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether she was fired or not. You're 100% right. We shouldn't say that. She didn't make it clear. You're right. But she mysteriously left.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Sky News Australia normally is very pro, as opposed to Sky News UK, which is very difficult to deal with. But regardless, Erin, you really have stood with truth, with justice, with human rights, and we hope to see many, many more great things from you in the future.
Absolutely.
And you are not just my hero, but a lot of people's hero this week.
Very
so
true.
God bless you. And with that, we end another week of the Quad, and we always end with the same prayer that by the time next week, and maybe we're getting closer this week, guys, that we will have our hostages home with their family. Please, God, amen. Thank you all for watching.